From the Associated Press, Mexico's president says he won't fight drug cartels on U.S. orders, calls it a Mexico first policy. So when you have America first policy, you're deemed a racist, and it's also quite strange, or not strange at all, and totally predictable how these things only flow in one direction, right? They can come over from all over the world, cross the border, swim through the river, barbed wire, all this stuff, and we just have to accept it. But when they even try to go back, some of the countries, Venezuela in particular, are saying, nope, can't do that. Could I just show up in Mexico, sans paperwork, and they're going to take me in, give me a hotel room and Lunchables? Absolutely not. Mexico's president said Friday he won't fight Mexican drug cartels on U.S. orders in the clearest explanation yet of his refusal to confront the gangs. So at least he acknowledges it, which I guess is a step in the right direction. For the longest time, the American political class wouldn't even acknowledge that this was a thing. Over the years, President Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador has laid out various justifications for his hugs not bullets policy of avoiding clashes with the cartels. So who's really in charge? You don't want to clash with them. You don't want to ruffle feathers. Seems like they're in charge, and they're actually trying to take over in America too. But in the past, he has said you cannot fight violence with violence. Okay, that's a political platitude if I've ever heard one. And on other occasions, he has argued the government has to address the causes of drug violence, ascribing them to poverty or lack of work opportunities. That sounds pretty American. Oh, yeah, well, we just have to get to the root cause. Of course, we never will. We're actually benefiting off the drug smuggling and people smuggling across the border. But on Friday, while discussing his refusal to go after the cartels, he made it clear he viewed it as part of what he called a, quote, Mexico first policy. We are not going to act as policemen for any foreign government. Okay, well, that kind of makes sense. I mean, you got some bad hombres, and you don't have to do it if you don't want to do it, but it's also kind of strange how, America, we're the police of everything. Oh, Ukraine, oh, Israel, all this stuff. Got to make sure that we're policemen of the entire world, and that has been going on for really quite some time. I believe there was a movie made about the entire thing.
America, fuck yeah! Come out again to save the motherfucking day, yeah, America, fuck yeah! Freedom is the only way, yeah.
Anyways, Lopez Obrador said at his daily news briefing, Mexico first, our home comes first. So why could we not just take a page out of that playbook and maybe protect the border to protect Americans in our homeland? Can't do that. Bridge too far. Lopez Obrador basically argued that drugs were a U.S. problem, not a Mexican one. He offered to help limit the flow of drugs into the United States, but only, he said, on humanitarian grounds. And that's another euphemism. It doesn't really mean anything. Or maybe it did at one point, but it's been so mutilated and bastardized that it has no meaning anymore. Oh, it's a humanitarian crisis. Oh, that's code word for just do whatever we say, otherwise you're a bad person. Of course, we are going to cooperate in fighting drugs, above all because it has become a very sensitive, very sad humanitarian issue, because a lot of young people are dying in the United States because of fentanyl, the president said. Over 70,000 Americans die annually because of synthetic opioids like fentanyl, which are mainly made in Mexico from precursor chemicals smuggled from China. Okay, so they're getting the ingredients from China, as we know, making them in Mexico, and then smuggling them over the border into the United States so that the lovely folks in the Tenderloin can OD on the sidewalk. Lopez Obrador's view, like many of his policies, harkens back to the 1970s, a period when many officials believed that Mexican cartels selling drugs to gringos was a U.S. issue, not a Mexican one. Well, if drugs are illegal in Mexico, then it is certainly part of your problem. I think both government. I'm no expert on geopolitics.
I am not the expert on geopolitics on this.
But if you guys are producing the drugs from ingredients imported from China and selling it, maybe you should stop the people from producing the drugs, and maybe Americans should stop people from smuggling it into the country. But I don't know. Maybe that's a little bit too simple. They want to make all of these issues very complicated because it helps the cause of just muddying the waters of absolutely everything. Oh, We have to come up with ideas and creative solutions. Well, it's really not that tough. But I digress. For decades, past administrations in Mexico have thought the war against drug cartels was basically a U.S. problem, said security analyst David Saucedo, noticing that Mexican domestic drug consumption, while growing, especially methamphetamines, is still at relatively low levels. So they are producing it and not even using it because they don't get high on their own supply. On the other hand, the drug cartels provide jobs in regions where the Mexican government can't provide economic development. They encourage social mobility and generate revenue through drug sales to balance trade and investment deficits. Are you are they? So I guess they're just co-signing drugs. Well, there's not enough legit jobs, so we encourage people to get into the drug trade because otherwise they'd be broke. Is that what that's supposed to mean? On the other hand, the drug cartels provide jobs in regions where the Mexican government can't provide economic development. What? It sounds like they're just co-signing that as a way for people to make money. This is wild. Lopez Obrador has argued before against demonizing the drug cartels and has encouraged leaders of the Catholic Church to try to negotiate peace pacts between warring gangs. So, look, I don't know this guy from a ham sandwich, this Obrador guy, but it sounds to me like he's in on the take. They provide drugs and don't demonize them. This is actually, I don't even think Bo Biden or the Democratic Party would go that far. This is wild. Explaining why he has ordered the army not to attack cartel gunmen, Lopez Obrador said in 2022, "We also take care of the lives of gang members. They are human beings." And this is the media basically highlighting this to contrast Trump, right? Trump says, "Oh, they're not even human beings." But the president of Mexico is coddling drug cartels, co-signing them, and saying, "Well, we can't provide jobs otherwise, so just go ahead and get into the dope trade." Absolute insanity. He has also sometimes appeared not to take the violence issue seriously. In June 2023, he said of one drug gang that had abducted 14 police officers, I'm going to tell on you to your fathers and grandfathers, suggesting they should get a good spanking. No, there's no way. He's got to be in on this. This is complete corruption. This is actually worse than American corruption, just from the little bit that I'm learning right now. Absolutely wild. Asked about those comments at the time, residents of one town in the western Mexico state of Michoacan, have lived under the drug cartel control for years, reacted with disgust and disbelief. "He is making fun of us," said one restaurant owner who asked to remain anonymous because he, like most everyone else in the town, has long been forced to pay protection money to the local cartel. Real mob activity, and at this point, I didn't even know anything about the Mexican president, but at this point, you're going to have a tough time convincing me that he's not in on the whole thing. He's literally the president and is co-signing the activities of murderous drug cartels and saying, "Well, they provide jobs and we take care of them, and if they get too out of line, I'll tell their dad so they can get a spanking." The president said out loud what he had suspected for a long time, that his administration is not really fighting the drug cartels. The security, he has only decided to administer the conflict, setting up what may have to be a crusade against the cartels in the future that he won't have to fight. Lopez Obrador also made a point of visiting the township of Badrigato in Sinaloa state, the home of drug lords like El Chapo, at least a half dozen times, and pledging to do so again before he leaves office in September. It's also a stance related to prickly nationalism and independence. Asked in November why he has visited the sparsely populated rural township so many times, Lopez Obrador quoted a line from an old drinking song, "Because I want to." Yeah, so he's going there because he's working with them, quite clearly. And the Associated Press could sniff this out, but they don't care. They're going to, lie and gaslight and tell you that it's all good. These are just average families. These aren't murderous drug cartels who are trying to torture the population of Mexico and America at the same time. The president has imposed strict limits on U.S. agents operating in Mexico and limited how much contact Mexican law enforcement can have with them. That's kind of like the Democrats in the state saying, we're not going to call ICE on you. Shout out Libby Schaff, who I didn't think the mayor of Oakland could get any worse, but here we are with Mayor Shang Tao, who's already facing a recall in her first year and a couple months. Different story. The U.S. Embassy in Mexico had no comment on Lopez Obrador's most recent remarks, but it did note the U.S. Treasury Department announced sanctions Friday on a Sinaloa cartel money laundering network in which the proceeds of fentanyl sales were used to buy shipments of cell phones in the United States, which were then sold to Mexico. John Kirby, spokesman for the White House National Security Council, credited strong partnership with the government of Mexico, with which he coordinated closely and for which we are grateful in investigating that case. While Mexico has detained a few high-profile gang members, the government's policy no longer matches what Mexican drug cartels have become: extortion machines that make much of their money not from trafficking drugs, but exporting protection payments from businessmen, farmers, shop owners, and street vendors, killing anyone who doesn't pay. They take over legitimate businesses, kill rival street-level drug dealers, and murder bus and taxi drivers who refuse to act as lookouts for them. The cartels control increasingly large swaths of territory, both in northern Mexico, their traditional base, and in southern states like Guerrero, Oaxaca, Chiapas, and Veracruz.
Su Pudenor, yo poder ver que usted ser caballo razonable.
It is unclear if peaceful coexistence was ever possible with Mexican drug gang. What? It's unclear if we could ever make peace with the murderous drug gangsters. What planet are these people on? While some regions have produced marijuana or opium poppies for at least 50 years, the illegal trade always brought violence. Duh. Lopez Obrador claims the Mexico First policy is needed to reduce domestic violence. Last year, he claimed Mexico saw a drop of 17% in homicides under his administration. But in fact, homicides had already fallen about 7% from their mid-2018 peak when Lopez Obrador took office in December of that year. The president is essentially taking credit for a drop that started under his predecessor, Enrique Peña Nieto. The most reliable annual counts shows that homicides in Mexico declined by 9.7% in 2022 compared to 2021, the first significant drop in the current administration. Mexico's National Statistics Institute said there were 32,223 killings in 2022. The country's homicide rate per 100,000 inhabitants dropped from about 28 in 2021 to 25 in 2022. By comparison, the U.S. homicide rate in 2021 was about 7.8 per 100,000 inhabitants. So we're doing better in that sense. Okay, I guess that's the end of it. But this is crazy. Quite obviously, look, again, I'm no expert on geopolitics, but how are you going to convince anybody that this guy is not in on the take with the drug cartels that he refuses to treat as criminals?